All right. Good morning, everyone. Bree banned from Top Step. What the heck? We'll talk about that in a bit. All right. Actually, this afternoon, not good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Getting back into trade reviews. Didn't do as many last week as I wanted. Very busy. Did mine a little bit earlier today because I got a lot to do. I am, heads up, not going to be here Thursday and Friday. Um, and I will be here every day beyond that into the foreseeable future. I don't really have a planned vacation until August and then a wedding in November, so I'll be here after that. All right, I'm going to review this morning. This morning, it wasn't that great of a morning. The price action was okay. I finished small red on options. Futures was nice and green. And, it was really only one trade that kind of killed the morning. Uh, wasn't anything crazy this morning. I know we had a huge run, but the cards just kind of fell in such a way that didn't allow me to make much money this morning. So let me go back to where we started. This is where we started this morning. As you can see, we have a decent amount of pivots to the upside, right? We got this one here, here, here. Okay. And then we have a bit on NQ. We have these here. And as you guys know, these yellow lines are my price targets. The priority goes yellow lines, supply and demand, Fibonacci, then risk to reward and patterns and whatnot. Okay, so judging by the 15-minute time frame, I didn't really have any bias this morning whatsoever. I just didn't have any. We weren't bullishly consolidating. Friday's trend was super strong. Thursday evening, last Friday's trend to the upside, super strong, but none of that continued overnight. We've only been treading downwards, but we haven't really treaded downwards in a bearish fashion. And now NQ's in daily demand. I have demand a little bit below on ES. There's just really no bias here. No pivots stand out to me either, except 69.81 on ES. You can see that this is a fairly major pivot from the open of Tuesday, last Tuesday. And we came up and barely missed it, only by roughly a point. So this is a big area of liquidity, but it's nowhere near current price action. So part of my pre-market analysis, as I said, the only pivot that stands out to me today that gives me sentiment is this one. And I won't really be super bullish for it to break until we get within 15 points of it. So roughly, here. If we can get up to here, then I'll be pretty bullish for this to break. Unfortunately, this morning, even though I did alert that, and when it did eventually get that far up, I did alert it. I was kind of done trading by that time. And yeah, so I didn't really get to partake in it. But let's go to market open. And no really major pivots to the downside. There are a little bit of opportunities. Here was the market open candle. This was an okay candle for puts, except, it got to this pivot right away. Now, NQ is still weaker than ES. I kind of debated a little bit if you guys were trading with me live. You guys saw that I debated a little bit of entering puts on the NASDAQ because it was weaker than ES. And the PT would be this lower demand and this ES pivot. I decided to wait a candle. And we did get lower. I got close, but we ended up putting in this reversal candle and ES remained stronger. Now, when this candle happened, I believe it was this candle. No, it wasn't this candle. Oh, wait, hang on. Let me share my screen real quick. And I have the recording, so you guys can go back and watch the first little bit. All right. So this is kind of where my first trade was placed, right? I thought about puts to the pivot on ES, hesitated because this buying wick ended up being a great decision. We got the reversal. Well, now ES is a lot stronger than the NASDAQ, and the NASDAQ has invalidated a majority of this move. NQ is also in daily demand here. So I'm leaning bullish, not just to here on NQ, but if it's invalidated a majority of the move, the nearest point of liquidity is here. Well, if we get to here, we might as well get to supply. It's right there, right? So looking at this chart, I'm now bullish to supply, and with ES being more bullish than NQ, is stronger than NQ, I'm bullish to supply as well. So this is my first trade of the day. SPX calls was decent. I don't really like entering up here, and I did end up adding, but it wasn't an average up or average down. I think I added 5 cents under where I initially entered. ES tried flipping wink on me. I think it was here. Yep. But we did get to PT. Now, I did pretty much sell everything at price target. I held one runner just for a little bit and didn't really add much to my profit target. Get rid of this arrow. Because during this trade, the contracts were chopping a lot. All right, the calls were chopping a lot. And that kind of shook me out of the market. That had me be a little bit conservative. I got 20% on the trade. However, I did tell you guys that the next PT would be this ES pivot and NQ pivot. I wish I held a little bit more, but it is what it is. They ended up getting like 50 to 60. I think they got like 70% gains, actually. I don't know. I'd like to think they did like 60% gains from what I can remember. So, first thing there, could have made a lot more money. My TA made it possible for me to make a lot more money, but I couldn't. Now, when we swept, this was a bearish liquidity sweep. But at this point, I was still actually bullish. I'm bullish for this NQ pivot here, despite the bearish liquidity sweep and NQ supply. So I'm liking a personal dip buy here. And I do. I dip by a little bit here. I didn't really alert this. I just said right on this candle, I'm scaling into this pullback. Right? A little bit more aggressive, unconventional. And unfortunately, because we only pulled back for literally one candle before we broke to the upside, I barely filled any. I filled like 2 contracts. So I made a little bit of extra money there. Not much. And then NQ ended up getting the pivot. I don't remember when NQ got the pivot. I believe it got it here. So I got it here. Now ES was starting to chop, but I was starting to lean bullish for ES to reclaim its strength. Now we're kind of chopping up on the NASDAQ. But look at this. This was pretty bullish, in my opinion. NQ is no longer chopping upwards. ES looks like it's bullishly consolidating. And then we get this beauty of a candle. I don't know what happened with this candle, but for some reason, we got put in the world's largest freaking buying wick. And I ended up filling a pretty light call position here. After it put in the buying wick, it came all the way back up, and then it came down, I filled, and then it went back up. And the buying wick was a lot bigger on ES. I was hesitant on filling the NASDAQ. Obviously, I always prefer SPX over QQQ when I'm trading options because of wash sale and tax reasons. But I was feeling like an ES was going to flip stronger than NQ at some point. Well, I didn't really end up averaging down. I could have averaged down, but I just stopped out here. I stopped out actually on this candle. So it was a pretty small loss. It was a very light trade. So I'm still green on the day, but a very light loss here. I was hoping to kind of scale in as we bullishly consolidate, but now this looks like, okay, that's a really bearish liquidity sweep. We're falling out of supply. And, if this buying wick invalidates, I got to start looking at puts. We did miss this pivot down here on ES. And this is pretty strong demand. This is fairly strong supply. I'm kind of looking at NQ being able to continue to demand. So I end up filling one last trade here. Right at the beginning of this candle, as the buying wick started invalidating, I was looking at puts to this ES pivot. But in the reality, I'm at the minimum looking for NQ to get to demand. When NQ gets to demand, it depends on how it gets there. But if it gets to demand and puts in any kind of buying wick or it hesitates on the way down, I'm going to sell most of the position at the NASDAQ demand because that is a big daily demand and we already did get a liquidity sweep. But I like to hold my runners to the ES low. Looking back on it, this is the only time of the day where my sentiment actually flipped bearish. And looking back, in the moment, I'm like, ah, man, if I avoided this trade, today would have been a lot better. But in reality, looking back on it, I think this is completely fine. These are pretty bearish candles. We had these nice buying wicks completely invalidate and completely reasonable to expect it to get to demand. It did not though, and I ended up stopping early. I entered half, keep in mind, I entered half size. I averaged down on this candle. And these puts were chopping, okay? So my first call started chopping, and as a result, that shook me out of the market because I was being more conservative and safe. Um, and then I'm in these puts, and they are just ferociously chopping. Like, ferociously chopping. I entered these puts at 2.45 here, and I averaged down, I think it was like on this candle, at 1.85. That's like a 20-something% drop in premiums, and we've barely moved. So that was pretty annoying. And when I start getting hammered like that and the contracts start chopping, I become a lot more reserved and conservative with my trading, and I don't put money on the table unless I'm really bullish for hypothesis or bearish for hypothesis to play out. So we end up coming up, and then we dump back down, and my new average is somewhere like right here. If I were trading futures, that's where it would be. And it doesn't even come close to break even. The highest these contracts got right here were like 2.0. Now my new average was 2.15. Got really close to stopping at here, was just a little bit hesitant because we might just start compressing, and I don't know which way we're going to break during that compression. Here I didn't even get close to break even. I think the contracts might have got to 1.9 or 1.8. I don't remember. But one thing I do know for sure is the contracts weren't even close to break even here. So this is where I made my stop loss really hard. The second this red candle invalidates, I'm out. And it did. It invalidated on this candle. I sold it. Was not a fun loss to take. Not so much because, it was bad TA or the sentiment was bad. I think the hypothesis was reasonable. But it sucks when you have a stop loss that tight. And I stopped out when those contracts were at 1.5. My entry was here at 2.5. That's a really small point loss, but the contracts dumped freaking almost 50%, like 40% from my initial entry, and we've barely moved. I'm barely red. And typically when that happens and the contracts are choppy like that, I'm not, I'll re-enter puts if we dump to the downside and we are barreling towards a pivot. That'll be a very likely trade. But now as I analyze this, it's like, yeah, now I'm leaning fairly bullish for new high of day, but nothing I would place a trade on because, we're still going against this bearish liquidity sweep and we're still going against the supply. But, that's kind of the way I'm leaning now. And if we did break to the upside from high of day, I think it would look pretty decent to this pivot, but nothing super high probability that'd be worth putting putting money on the table. And here it is. We pretty much got there. And I called out this as a decent dip buy because now I'm bullish for these pivots. But, with the way the contracts were chopping, and I'm just not really feeling. I mean, we ran so hard lately. I don't really know how I feel about, being bullish to any of these specific pivots, especially with supply so high. The only place where I'll have a lot of sentiment is if we can get up to like here. If we can get within 15 points of this PT, then I'll have a lot of bullish sentiment. I'll lean pretty heavy towards ES getting to the 69.81 break. So right now there's just simply not enough sentiment. And by this point, I'm pretty much done trading options. I'm out of it. We start chopping for a bit. This is bullish consolidation. We call it out in the live trading. I stay here and keep analyzing. And a lot of you guys continue to make money even to this pivot here. And when we were right here, even though I wasn't trading options anymore, when we were roughly right here, I think it was at 8:15. I don't remember when I sent out that announcement. I sent out an announcement in my alert channel that says that I said, ES now in range of my 69.81 pivot price target. I'm now leaning bullish for that pivot to clear today. Right? I did at least send that TA alert out, and that was I'm kind of jealous because a lot of you guys got to trade it and I didn't really get to because it broke. Um, oh wait, I did get to trade it. I forgot. I didn't get to trade on options. I traded on futures, and that's the one thing I did for futures. Wait, no, I couldn't. Never mind. I could not trade it for futures because it didn't bullishly consolidate. The futures trade I ended up taking was the bullish consolidation here. If it had a huge break to the upside, unfortunately, so I got a bad average, but I traded to this big pivot, which is the same pivot um, time wise. So this was a pretty big green trade, and that's the trade I took. My fill was a little bit better. I think it was somewhere down here. But yeah, it's just unfortunate because I got shaken out of the market kind of early with the contracts chopping, and by the time I started my sentiment became very strong. It was pretty much at the end of my options trading session anyways. I was moving to futures, so I finished today light red. Definitely could have been green, if I just continued trading. But for the most part, I think based on what everyone told me, most people that attended the live trading were green today. So I'd still consider today a pretty good day as far as TA goes, execution goes, and yeah, the only difference is this trade didn't really matter. It was super light, so that really wasn't a big loss at all. And looking back at that trade, that was a completely reasonable trade. So I don't really have an issue, especially that because I entered this trade half size. I mean, very reasonable trade. Just sucks that the contracts chopped so hard this morning. But that was my morning. That's all the thought and analysis behind the alerts in my trades. Does anyone have any questions regarding anything that I did? No, everyone's good? All right, just a reminder, if you guys trade futures and you use the firm Tradeovate, you can now link your Tradeovate to my journaling platform, which is Northstar. If you guys are interested in that, it's on the Aurora website. It is completely free to use, does not cost anything. It is a very advanced journaling platform, and it's made to actually help you build a strategy using our advanced keyword system. So it's more of a strategy builder than it is a journaling platform. But now you can connect your Tradeovate to it. So if you haven't done that yet, do it. I don't know what you guys are doing. It's literally free. There's not a single cost. There's no cost with it whatsoever. I pinky promise. And the reason it's free is because I use it. And if I use it, it doesn't cost any more for me to have you guys use it as well. So take advantage of that. But that's pretty much it. So I'll wrap up this recording right now. And then stick around for a couple minutes. I have some stuff to say. And then I'll also let you guys know when this recording's posted. But hopefully tomorrow with options, the TA is just as good, but I don't get shaken out of the market early, and I'm actually able to execute more of my hypotheses.